Hello and welcome to the Legends of Opera, where we shall be delving into the lives of the incredible singers who have given us the heritage of opera. José Carreras is such an unforgettable artist. Renowned for the purity of his beautiful voice and handsome good looks, he will always be a legendary tenor.
José Carreras is one of our greatest opera stars, and he's loved by the world for his voice, for his stage presence, but he's also loved for his humanity, for his story, and the emotion and gift that he gave to the world.
There was a honeyed sweetness to the tenor, which was gorgeous. It really was.
Good quality of voice, morbida, sweet, also strong, but sweet.
Selling over 85 million records, Carreras is one of the most commercially successful opera singers of all time. And his role with the Three Tenors, opposite Pavarotti and Domingo, propelled him to an even wider audience.
This incredible degree of emotional investment in the stage. This very, very warm Mediterranean personality, which I think comes through in his recordings.
He really is an opera superstar.
Famous for his clarity of tone and romantic expression, it was his remarkable battle with leukemia and subsequent recovery that makes Carreras something of the miraculous. José Carreras was born in 1946 in Barcelona. He was the youngest of 3 children and was to grow up in a difficult political climate in Spain under the regime of Franco.
Carreras grew up in genteel poverty. His father had been a teacher, but was very bitterly opposed to Franco, and in fact fought for the Republicans.
After the Spanish Civil War was won by Franco, he lost his position. He had to become a policeman. José Carreras is always very attached to Catalonia. So for this to happen was a big mark on him in his life.
His parents found it very difficult, and they actually emigrated to Argentina for 1 year in José's childhood, but then came back.
It really was not an easy life when you are a Catalan under the Franco regime. And for him, music was a great escape from the stresses and the strains of everyday life. That's when they started giving him actual lessons. So he started doing voice and piano with a friend of his mother's. He started learning how to sing properly. And it was very clear to his teachers that they had a great talent on their hands.
Carreras with a great passion for music quite early on. I think he was 6 when he saw Mario Lanza in The Great Caruso.
Well, like all boys of his age and all great singers of that generation, he absolutely adored this awful Technicolor film called The Great Caruso.
Which tenor didn't? Domingo claims this, Pavarotti claims this, but yeah, Carreras watched the great Caruso, watched it on repeat, learnt all the arias, apparently annoyed his family so much that he locked himself in the bathroom so that they couldn't actually get to him to stop him singing.
By the age of 8, he was singing on Spanish National Public Radio, and he was also taking on boy soprano roles at the Opera Theatre, and he loved it. He loved singing on stage. It was his great passion.
At the Liceo in Barcelona, he had a couple of child roles. He sang one of the children in Bohème, in Act 2, but then also this very small Manuel de Falla opera, Master Peter's Puppet Show.
At such a young age, it was clear to everyone around Carreras that he was a special talent. He was able to sing and act the parts usually played by adults in a standout performance at a great opera house. It would set the tone for his teenage years. After a 2-year spell at university studying chemistry, he went on to study at the Conservatory of Music.
He had 2 teachers. He was clearly very fortunate in Francisco Puig, who I think gave him a lot of stagecraft, and Juan Ruax, who he later referred to as his artistic father.
It was Ruax that encouraged him to audition for a very tiny role in Bellini's Norma in Barcelona at the Liceo. Now, it was a very small, insignificant role, but that was a lucky break, because singing Norma was the great soprano Montserrat Caballé.
Carreras was just Flavio, who is the tenor's friend, and only has a few bars to sing, but he caught Caballé's ear and eye, and they struck up a great friendship, actually.
Montserrat Caballé first meets Carreras at the beginning of 1970, and by the end of 1970, they're singing together in the absolute great role. He's Gennaro in Donizetti's Lucrezia Borgia. That is his first great debut, and he's singing alongside one of the greatest opera singers in the world. There could hardly be a more cataclysmic debut that you could possibly have.
She took him under her wing, literally, guided him, shaped him. Her brother Carlos helped him, and he became a part of her family.
The relationship with Caballé proved to be the foundation on which Carreras' career was built. They became great friends and would often sing together for many years to come. Sharing an agent, Caballé fostered his career, and in 1971, Carreras made his international debut alongside Caballé at London's Royal Festival Hall in Maria Stuarda.
Maria Stuarda, the great tragic story of the Scottish Queen, and she played the big role, and he was her supporting actor, as it was. That was a real great moment for him. He was a great success. He was delightedly received. Although, of course, all the attention was on Montserrat Caballé, a large amount of it was also going to Carreras as well.
One critic said that he had never heard such a beautiful tenor, the liquid quality of his voice, the depth of it, yet also this beautiful lyric quality. And just bowled over by him.
He was very influential on him in the early days, and together they made some great recordings.
He had the most fantastic reviews in his early career. In fact, I think probably he was more sensational than Domingo or Pavarotti, because he was still only in his 20s. Very handsome, very ardent, and a voice of great, great beauty.
During the 1970s, Carreras' career progressed rapidly. In late 1971, he won first prize in Parma's prestigious Voci Verdiane competition. Following on from his competition success, Carreras made his Italian debut as Rodolfo in La Bohème at Parma's Royal Theatre. As Carreras' popularity soared with his memorable performances, he went on to his American debut with the New York City Opera as Pinkerton in Madame Butterfly, a role he made his own in his flourishing early career.
Nowadays, lots of Pinkertons get booed at curtain calls. It's not a terribly grateful sing, to be honest. You're off stage for a lot of the time. But for a young tenor, it's a good role at the start of your career.
He sings it so beautifully that he almost makes you like this man who is really, Pinkerton's an absolute rotter.
Of course, he gets the great blessing of the New York Times critic who just raves about his voice. The way he describes it, it sounds like wine. It's mellow, it's beautiful. And of course, once you make it there, you're on the kind of ladder for the whole United States opera circuit.
He was a great singer, he was a great actor, and he was a beautiful, brilliant stage presence. And New York City Opera and Carreras had this really marvelous relationship.
Throughout the 1970s, Carreras performed at all the leading opera houses around the world. Notable performances included Alfredo in La Traviata. Another notable performance was at La Scala in Milan, one of the leading opera theatres in the world. There, Carreras shone as Riccardo in Un ballo in maschera.
La Scala, Milan, this great temple of Italian opera in Un ballo in maschera by Verdi, and he says later on that he thinks that was the absolute peak of his career, and I can well imagine that it was. It was a role that suited him beautifully, and I just wish I'd been there.
All of these great opera houses, they were all inviting him to come and play the great roles. And he was beloved by the audiences. He was very enthusiastically received. And he was also seen as someone who worked very well in terms of the duets and in terms of the romantic parts of the drama.
For about 5 years in the mid-1970s, he can do no wrong. He makes a series of debuts. He is acclaimed everywhere he goes. I can remember hearing him in 1976 in the very first Bohème I ever heard, and he was absolutely glorious.
In 1981, Carreras returned to New York's Metropolitan Opera to appear in Franco Zeffirelli's production of La Bohème. It was the only time he would work with Zeffirelli.
Of course, Maestro Zeffirelli must have him, so he brings him into the Met for La Bohème, and it was just a sensation.
Zeffirelli picked Carreras to play Rodolfo opposite Teresa Stratas, and that was a great role for him. Zeffirelli was a brilliant director for Carreras and really brought out the light and shade in his voice.
The gorgeous Teresa Stratas as his Mimi, and they really do look like gorgeous young things.
Carreras, he was a great artist. A young Carreras with Teresa Stratas. Magical capo, great voices, great acting. You know, it's so touching. You really believe in that story. Was so innocent, the artist Carreras in the role. Teresa Stratas was, very good actress as well. And it's a magical experience to go through the production. You get so involved in the two characters. They really make you believe that the story is real, which is difficult sometimes in the opera field, that the singer attracts you because the acting in this particular case is so beautiful, so easy, so well done that you get really involved into the characters. It's like watching a movie. A director like Zeffirelli was very happy to have a singer of the quality, in his hand to move him around, Both the couple was wonderful. For when he has those kind of characters, they can react to the suggestion, to the directions. The directors gets much more involved.
Carreras worked with many conductors during his career, but the most influential was Herbert von Karahan. He really had a huge impact on Carreras' career. He really encouraged him to take on the big, heavy roles, the big, significant roles. And perhaps for some, those roles were too big for Carreras' voice.
Possibly the root of the problem for Carreras, the thing that really went wrong with him, was Herbert von Karahan, a great conductor who loved beautiful voices and took Carreras up.
The sort of roles that he was singing early in his career, they were perfect for Carreras' size of voice. It was a very sweet voice, it was a very honeyed voice. But as soon as you start taking on the heavier rep, like Riccardo in Ballo in Maschera, like Don Carlo, that put a big strain on his voice. He liked to be in control. He would pick his casts very carefully. And would you say no to Karahan? Lots of young singers wouldn't dare. If you turn him down, would you ever get picked again? So he'd pick his cast very carefully. He liked young casts. He obviously liked good-looking singers who could act. But in terms of recordings and filmed performances, he was also something of a dictator. When it came to recording, he would be in charge when it came to sound balance. So if you listen to the Aida with Carreras, if you listen to the Don Carlo with Carreras, you struggle to hear the voices at times because the orchestra, the Berlin Philharmonic, is so loud. I would love to go back to the original master tapes, which are now owned by Warner, who took out EMI. And I'd love them to rebalance those recordings and reissue them, because there was some splendid singing on them.
Karahan worked Carreras very hard in these big roles. I think too hard. I think it was too much of a strain on his voice and on his health. But he was desperate to play these big roles, and he did it brilliantly.
Aida, in particular, with Karahan, was really his first great disaster. You could see him pushing. The voice suddenly became harder, and it lost that honey quality, that feeling of absolute easy flow, and it became much more effortful.
In the 1980s, Carreras moved out of the strictly operatic repertoire and started performing more operettas, musical entertainment. He sang in South Pacific, he sang in West Side Story. I think it was easier on his voice. Certainly there were roles that he could occupy with much more ease than he could singing a huge role in Aida.
He may come cannonballing down from the sky, gleam in its eye, bright as a rose.
He's in New York at the Met, and of course, who should come to him? The musical king of New York, Leonard Bernstein, and suggested, why don't you sing musicals?
I got a feeling there's a miracle due, gonna come true, coming to me.
It's at this point in the whole industry where singers of his stature and his age began to think about branching out.
Unfortunately, there was a documentary made of the rehearsals in which he emerges, Carreras, as he gets very, very uptight.
If you are so kind, I would like to do these 3 bars alone. I mean,
122.
The rest. To start here, please.
Oh, come on. You do it wonderfully.
At one point, the camera catches him storming out. Bernstein was just sort of playing with him, but clearly got it wrong.
Well, it's always difficult to build up an atmosphere, and after 10 minutes to have to stop that because the session is over. At that moment, I was a little bit, let's say, not too happy, but it's the way it is.
As well as these successful ventures into musical recordings, Carreras never strayed too far from his love of the operatic stage. Becoming synonymous with certain roles throughout his career, another was Don José in Bizet's Carmen. At the height of his career, aged just 40 years old, Carreras' life changed forever in 1987 after collapsing during a rehearsal in Paris.
He goes to Paris to do La Bohème, to film it, and in the early part of it, he's rushed to the hospital, and they discover that he has leukemia. And he's got the kind that's giving him about 10% chance of survival.
He embarked on a very grueling set of treatment about chemotherapy, operations. It was very tough, and he fought through.
He recovers, but he's a different person, of course, as he would be, having to go through that. So he's on his own, he doesn't know whether he's gonna make it, and he always said it changed his life. This changed his life.
It takes a huge toll on his physical abilities, and it takes him a couple of years to get back on stage.
To come back and then resume a professional career after that sort of illness is itself remarkable.
Carreras made a remarkable recovery and was back on stage the following year with a number of recitals, including the Vienna comeback.
Manora cantada en copias preciosas. Tengo otra cosa que darte que un ramo de rosas.
Ever since he was a little boy, all he did was work, push, drive, go the next rung of that ladder, and he couldn't stop for a minute to realize that there was life out there. So he makes his foundation, the José Carreras Foundation, using the name he was born with, work with victims, give them hope, pour his money into it, pour his time into it, and he just decided he was going to live.
He's dedicated the rest of his life to his Leukemia Foundation, very, very serious about it, and it's done a huge amount of good.
Carreras established the José Carreras International Foundation Against Leukemia to foster research, to help those who had leukemia, and this was really important to him, this foundation, and it raised a huge amount of money for research, for sufferers, and partly because he gave so many benefit concerts for it.
Carreras followed up with many recitals for his Leukemia Foundation, including in Salzburg, which demonstrated the quality of his voice. After his recovery from leukemia, José Carreras was to stun the world once more with the formation of the Three Tenors alongside Luciano Pavarotti and Plácido Domingo. Their performance on the eve of the 1990 World Cup final in Rome would propel the trio onto the world stage in a way no one could anticipate.
The Three Tenors concert in Rome really showed the world that Carreras was back.
Cataclysmic amount of success and attention drawn to the Three Tenors, drawn to their World Cup performance. Their albums were multi-platinum. They sold 3 million overnight. People were watching them on TV. They were invited to play all over the world. And it was an incredible success and a thrilling moment for them, and particularly for Carreras.
With the Three Tenors, the famous Three Tenors, Carreras was a boy. The voice of the purity, a voice of the spirit.
Their first concert in Rome, it sold 13 million albums. Also, they broke through into popular culture. They were being discussed on comedy shows, part of adverts. The 1990s was really the time of the Three Tenors.
The three of them together. He loved them. They loved each other. It was quite obvious on the stage. You can see it. And it was part of their camaraderie that really allowed them to not only do the Three Tenors for his foundation, but to do it for lots of different charities and lots of different people. It just went all over the world.
For so many people, this was their first real engagement with opera, children and adults, and that was really very important to Carreras. Started out as a fundraising mission, and really then it became a mission to take opera throughout the world, and they were just delighted by how successful it had become. That was an incredibly inspiring story. This man, who'd been given a 1 in 10 chance of survival, had not just survived, but he was also out there on the operatic stages, doing what he loved, still, it seemed, untouched by the illness.
The original performance in Rome from the Three Tenors became the best-selling classical recording of all time. He went on to be music director for the Barcelona Olympics and performed live to the world once more.
It was a particularly important moment for Carreras when he was invited to be the musical director of the Olympics when they were in Barcelona in 1992. He conducted the opening and closing ceremonies. And for a young boy who'd grown up in this very working-class district, who'd been discriminated against because he was Catalan, to be up there, to be the musical director of the Olympic Games, well, that was really a great thrill. And it also allowed him to press home his big point that music should be a part of all big commemorations.
Continuing touring with the Three Tenors throughout the 90s, Carreras also performed at the Royal Opera House, Covent Garden, in the title role in Verdi's Stifelio.
He had 1 or 2 big successes after leukemia, particularly in the revival of an opera by Verdi called Stifelio, which was very little known at the time. It had hardly ever been revived in the modern era. And Carreras was the first to bring it back. He got there first before Domingo and Pavarotti. It turned out to be a very interesting piece. He did it at Covent Garden, he did it at Met, he did it in Vienna. And that was really his last big success as an opera singer.
I saw him at Covent Garden. Stufalio is often called one of the great neglected Verdi masterpieces. Carreras and Domingo were both great champions of that role in the 90s. I remember he sang that at Covent Garden opposite Catherine Malfitano in a very good production. He was very convincing. It's not an heroic tenor role. He plays a minister who discovers that his wife is possibly having an affair. It's a role where he eventually forgives his wife. So it's not a great dramatic, heroic sort of role. But that suited him very nicely.
Carreras appeared in Zurich in Sly, which was a modern opera. In 2008, he released an album called Mediterranean Passions. Mainly in this latter part, Carreras goes very close to his Catalonian roots, to Barcelona, to that whole feeling. He thinks more and more about how wonderful it was and how wonderful it is, the great privilege of being able to sing and to be able to express the things that he wants to express. He's grateful every day for his life.
In his prime, Carreras had one of the most beautiful tenor voices in opera. His phrasing was second to none, and throughout his career he was continually praised for his vocal artistry. His 2018 self-proclaimed farewell tour, aged 71, was a touching tribute to a true opera great.
José Carreras' career encompassed so many different types of roles. The great classic roles in Madame Butterfly, for example, and La Bohème. But also famously, he also performed in The West Side Story for Leonard Bernstein. So he was someone who had a real versatility.
A lot of people would have Carreras as one of their favourite tenors in the 20th century. He had a beautiful voice, and there were some exquisite moments in his career.
A great ambassador for the art form. He's a great ambassador for Barcelona and Catalonia, and a wonderful champion for people with leukemia, and just one of these singers whose life is so big, so immense, that you can see him going on and on and on.